Well, looking through your data and you're finding so many mistakes and errors, or you are making data inputs and you are having to do it one by one, I ask two questions. Did you reference? Or why not reference? In this video, I teach you all about cell referencing and also I tackle the three types of referencing: the relative referencing, the absolute referencing, and the mixed referencing. So kindly stick with me to the end. Let's get right into it. Well, here I am in my Excel workbook, and today this is the data we'll be using for this lesson. So let's say we want to do some basic calculations using these numbers over here. So let's bring in the equal sign and type in the 30 plus the 23, and let's simply press, sorry, it's plus 23. So let's simply press the enter, and if you have to carefully look at it, it gives us the final results of 53. Yay, it's correct, right? So now if you want to do same for this, let's simply drag it down, or we can simply bring in the equal sign and add this to this. So let's simply drag it down and see what happens. Oops, as you can see, there is a glitch in this calculation, right? Obviously 40 plus 22 isn't 53, right? And 45 plus 21 isn't 53, right? So what it is doing is, what it is simply picking up the first calculation with it and simply what bringing it down, but that's not what we want, right? So this is the first glitch that comes with what not referencing your what cell when doing some calculations or data inputs. So here comes the almighty cell referencing. So let's say we want to use the same numbers to do the calculation. We introduce our almighty equal sign. Then rather than typing these numbers, we'll simply select the very first cell in which the number we want to add to is in, then simply bring in the plus sign again. Then we want to add it to the very next cell, so we'll simply select the cell in which the number is found and simply press what, enter. And ooh la la, it does the same calculation. Right now let's drag it down to see if these calculations will be done for us. If you have to come down, as you can see, this cross sign changes to this black sign if you have to come right next to the end of the cell. So we'll simply drag it down to see, and voila, yay, it has done the calculation for us, right? 40 plus 22 is what, 62, and 45 plus 21 is obviously what, 66. So this is one very advantage of using cell referencing. So if the list was to go down, 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 all you need to do is to simply do the same thing. Come over here as it changes, double click on it, and it will do that calculation for you. Another pri- Another advantage of cell referencing or referencing is, in the case that this very data over here, or this very output, or this very input is to change, then it affects what your final results. Let me show you what I mean. So let's say we don't want to add 30 again to 23. We want to, let's say, add simply what, 20 to 23. Let's simply press enter. If you have to carefully look at it, it affects what your final results, unlike before, which what still remains what, 53, even though the very output or the very input has changed what, to 20. So if let's say 40 is to change to, let's say, 45, and we have to press enter, it changes to what, 67. So these are some advantages of using the cell referencing in your Excel work. And so moving on, cell referencing doesn't apply to calculations or numbers only. You can also apply cell referencing when you are dealing with tests. So in the case you want to reference or type in Barcelona over here, rather than typing it manually, you can always use the equal sign to reference it, then select it, right? Then simply what, press enter, and Barcelona will be referenced here for you. In the case that the test is to change over here, obviously it will change also. So another advantage over here is, rather than coming to the next cell, bringing the equal sign, then referencing this, all you have to do is to simply select the cell in which you first reference, then come to the very end, you simply drag it to the very next cell you want the other text to appear. And if you have to carefully look at it, the Yamal has what appeared over here. If you want to reference all these ones, all you need to do is to simply come to the very end of where these two tests ends and simply what, drag it down, and your test will appear over here. Another thing also, if the test is to continue on and on and you want to reference it, you can simply do the same thing. So you simply reference the first one, then simply what, drag it until it ends, or until the very place you want to reference you want to reference it up to. And also you can simply reference it in another sheet also. So let's say we want to reference this in a very different or separate sheet. We will simply click the plus sign over here, and as you can see, a new sheet has appeared. Then let's say we want to reference it in cell B3, so we'll simply bring, or we'll simply select the cell, bring in the equal sign. Then we'll come to the cell, or we'll come to the sheet in which we want to do the referencing from, and simply select the team, and let's press enter. And the team has appeared over here. Let's simply drag it to the very next cell, and ooh la la, the player has now appeared. So let's simply drag it down to C, and voila, our data has been referenced here also. So let's say now, if we have to change a simple text over here, so let's say no, we don't want Bruno over here. Let's say we want Cunha, so we'll simply type in Cunha, right, and press enter. And voila, as you can see, Cunha has appeared here. Now let's go to our sheet 2 and see whether Cunha, ooh la la, it has also worked over here also. So these, or this is, so these are the importance of what, or some of the importance of what, cell referencing or referencing in Microsoft Excel. And moving on, there are three types of what we call the cell referencing. So we have the relative referencing, the absolute referencing, and the mixed referencing. So let's first start with the relative referencing. So what in Excel do we refer to as relative referencing? So let's do some basic calculations, right? So we'll simply bring in the equal sign, select this cell over here, then add it to this and simply press what, enter, and our final output will be done. So to know what relative referencing is, let's simply drag this or double click to bring it down. So if you have to carefully look at all these calculations that are being done, it's picked up from 8 very corresponding cells right next to it. So 60 plus 42 is obviously 102, right? And 50 plus 65 is what, 115. So what relative referencing does is, as you move down, Excel picks up that you want to do the calculations right below the cell above. So as you move from this cell to this, Excel picks up that what you want to do the calculation with these numbers. And if you are to move to the next cell below, it picks up that what you want to do the calculation with these numbers. So if you are to add another, number, so let's say we want to add 80 to, let's say, 43, and we press enter. As you can see, Excel picks up that what we want to do these calculations. So this is what we refer to in Excel as what, relative referencing. As you move down, Excel will do the calculations for you per the values provided in the cell below. So moving on, we will talk about the absolute referencing. So in mathematics, we have what we call a constant, and a constant is what, whilst the other factors changes, the constant what remains the same. So that's what in Excel we refer to as absolute referencing. So whilst the other cells changes, there is one we make as a fixed constant or as a fixed value that doesn't change. So let's say in this very cell or in this very sheet, we want to add all these numbers to this number, to only this number over here. So we want to add 20 to 5, 30 to 5. So let's bring in our equal sign, right? So let's simply bring in our equal sign, then select the 20, then add it to this 5 over here. So we'll select the cell and press enter. So if you have to carefully see, obviously the answer has been given to us. 20 plus 5 is 25. So how about if you have to simply drag it down? So let's simply double click on it and see. So if you have to come to the very next cell and check the formula over here, it is adding what, 30 to what, 25. But that's not the calculation we want, right? What we want is to add this 30 to this 5. And if you have to come to the very next cell, this 45, we don't want to add it to 55. We want to add it to what, to the 5. So how do we face this glitch or this problem? So let's come to the very first cell we started the calculation or the formula from. And if you have to carefully look at the cell in which the 5 is, it is in cell what? Cell C what? 3. So this is the cell we want to make a constant, right? So let's simply select the first cell in which the formula started. Then we'll simply come over here. So this is what, cell C3. We'll bring the cursor to it, to the very end of it, and we'll introduce what we call the dollar sign. So we'll simply press on the F4 key on our keyboard once. So we'll simply press on it, And if you have to carefully see, the dollar sign appears before the column C and before the what? The rule 3. So in Excel, it means that what? Both the cell and the column has been what? Or have been locked down. So there is no changing it as it moves down. So now let's simply press enter again. So now 25, this still remains the same, right? So now let's drag it down to C. So if you have to drag it down and now do the math again, so let's simply show the formula. Let's simply click on it. So if you have to carefully see, now 54 is adding to 5, 50 is adding to 5, 45 is adding to 5, and so problem solved, right? So this is what we refer to in Excel as what? The absolute referencing. So whilst the others changes, this what or this remains constant. Obviously we can make this one to an absolute. So let's come over here, let's come to our cell B4 and simply hit the F4 key once and simply press enter. This obviously remains the same. So now let's drag it down, simply drag it down, and if you have to carefully look through, now the 20 has now also become what? A constant, whilst what? The 5 also is what? A constant. So this is what? Absolute referencing. So anytime you pick an Excel work or an Excel sheet, and if you have to see all these dollar signs in them, don't panic. It simply tells you that those cells have been locked, and so they need to be as it is. And the last referencing we will talk about is what? The mixed referencing. So what does the mixed referencing do? So in the mixed referencing, it simply means whilst a row remains constant, the column what? Varies, or whilst the column remains constant, what? The row varies. So let me show you what I mean. So let's say in this calculation over here, we want to add this 20 to this 5 over here, and the results over here will be added to this 6 over here, so that we'll get the final results over here, and as it goes, it does that calculation for us. So let's simply introduce the equal sign, right? Then now add this. So let's simply add this to this, simply press enter, and now let's drag it to C. So we'll simply drag it to the very end of it. So now let's check the formula over here. Obviously it does what we want for us, right? It adds this very cell to this very next cell above it to give us the final results over here as we want. So now what about if we are to drag it down to the very end? So let's simply drag it down to C. So if you have to drag it down to C, then come to and check out the formula. This is not what we had in mind, right? What we had in mind was the final results attained over here, right? But after adding this to this, should be added to this one over here to get a final results over here. But what this is doing is, it is rather adding what? The final results, right? What next to the one above it to give us the results, which is not what we want. So obviously over here, Excel is still doing what we call the what? The relative referencing. So as it moves, it adds to what? The very next available number to give us a final results. But what did we want? We want it to be that as it moves, only this what? This remains constant, whilst this what? Varies. So now let's fix this problem. So to do that, we'll select the very first cell in which we started the calculation, obviously. Then now what we want to remain a constant is the row. So whilst the row what remains constant, so if you have to set this to a constant, as it moves down, it doesn't change. But what we want to vary now is what? The column, because we want this as it moves, it adds to this, as it moves, it adds to this, and these are in what? In columns. So now how do we solve this? So where is this number found? So it's obviously in what? Cell C3, right? So what we'll do is to bring the cursor to the very end of it. Then now we'll introduce we'll hit the F4 key twice. So we'll simply hit on it. Now both the cell and the column is locked. Then let's hit on it again. Now only the row has been locked, right? So now let's simply hit the enter key, right? And now let's drag it to the very end of it again. Obviously this will remain the same, right? Now let's simply drag it down again. Ooh la la. So if you have to carefully check the formula again now, as you can see, this now adds to this, right? As we wanted. And let's see this one also. This one now adds to this, right? And now let's check the last one also. This one also what? Adds to this one over here, adds to this to give us the final results over here. So this what we refer to as in Excel the mixed referencing. But what if moving on, we want to add this to this, and whilst we are moving to the very next cell or next column, what we want is this should rather add to this and not this number also. So how do we also face this glitch, right? So now what we do is now to set this one also. So now over here, what we want to do is what this column over here should remain a constant whilst what the row varies, because as we move down, the 20 is in row 4, 30 is in row 5. So obviously the row will change whilst the column remains a constant. So to fix this glitch or this problem, let's select the very first formula obviously again, and over here the very cell we will work on is the cell B4. So we'll bring the cursor to the very beginning of it, or you can bring it to the end of it. Then now over here, like I said, we want to what set only the column to a constant. So we'll simply hit the F4 key once, twice, and the last one. So if you have to carefully see, now the cursor comes only before the column B. But obviously you can also do this manually by always using the shift key, then you press on the dollar key on your keyboard to do that. So you can always, if you don't want to use the F4 key, you can always use the shift 4, the shift plus 4 to always apply the dollar sign. So now let's press the enter to see. So let's now drag it. So let's simply drag it. Yes, this is what we wanted, right? So now 20 plus 5. So let's check it. So 20 plus 6. Let's move on. So 20 plus what? 7. So moving on. Now let's simply select the entire row, the first row, and simply what drag it down to see whether it works for the remaining ones. So let's simply check our formula now, and voila, yay! So now it has what, or we've solved the problem we're talking about. So this is how you can also apply maze referencing. So you can either set your row to a constant or your column to a constant whilst what the other varies. So now we know what a relative referencing is, we know what an absolute referencing is, and what a maze referencing is. So anytime you have to pick an Excel worksheet and you have to see these things, don't panic. Now you know what they mean. So now here comes the last question. Will you reference? If you will, then kindly hit the like and subscribe button.